I never thought I'd be sitting here, trying to piece together the broken fragments of my life. Sarah and I have been married for 8 years, and during that time, I believed I knew her better than anyone. We shared everything, or at least I thought we did. From the moment we met, Sarah portrayed herself as a devoted Christian, someone who lived by faith and principles. She was the kind of person who volunteered at the church, led Bible study, and was always the first to remind us of the virtues of living a godly life. I admired her dedication, her unshakable faith. I thought it was one of the things that made her special. But all of that was a lie. The reality I uncovered was something far darker, something that shattered the foundation of everything I believed in. It's been a few days since I found out, but the shock hasn't worn off. The hurt, the anger, the confusion, they all swirl around inside me, making it impossible to think straight. Every time I close my eyes, I see her. Not the Sarah I knew, but a different version of her, one I never imagined existed. Started off like any ordinary evening. I was working late in my home office, trying to finish some reports for work. Sarah had gone to one of her church meetings, as she often did, and the house was quiet. I figured she'd be home soon, so I was just wrapping things up when I heard her phone ding on the dining table. Normally, I wouldn't pay much attention to it, but for some reason, the constant stream of notifications caught my attention. It wasn't the usual sound of text messages or email alerts. This was different. After about the 5th notification, curiosity got the better of me. Sarah wasn't the type to be glued to her phone, so this was unusual. I walked over to the table and glanced at the screen. The app that was sending the notifications was one I didn't recognize. Something about it didn't sit right with me, but I told myself I was probably overthinking it. She was my wife. What could she possibly be hiding? But then I did something I'm not proud of. I picked up her phone and unlocked it. Maybe it was that nagging feeling in my gut, or maybe it was the silence in the house that suddenly felt too loud. Either way, I opened the app. What I saw, it felt like the floor had just dropped out from under me. It was her, Sarah, my wife, in pictures, explicit pictures, posing for strangers on the internet. I stood there, staring at the screen in disbelief, my heart racing as if I'd been punched in the gut. There were dozens of images, all of them showing a side of her I had never seen before. And the comments, there were hundreds of comments from random men. They were saying things I couldn't even bring myself to read. I couldn't move. It felt like the world had slowed down around me, like I was watching it all happen from outside my body. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be Sarah, the woman who prays every night before bed, who leads our church's youth group, who insists we watch nothing but wholesome family movies. She couldn't be the same person in these pictures. But there she was. For a few minutes I just stood there, numb. I didn't know what to think, what to feel. Was this some kind of joke? A hack? But no, the app was real, and so were the pictures. Slowly, the numbness gave way to anger, a deep, burning anger that I hadn't felt in years. How could she do this? How could she betray me like this? Every memory of us together suddenly felt tainted, stained by this horrible revelation. I wanted to smash her phone right then and there. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to do something to make sense of what I had just seen. But I didn't. Instead, I sat down, still holding her phone, and scrolled through more of the images. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I was looking for some explanation, something that would help me understand why she was doing this. But with each picture, each flirtatious comment, it became clearer that this wasn't some innocent mistake. She had been doing this for a while, posting these pictures, interacting with these strangers, and from the looks of it, she enjoyed it. By the time Sarah came home, I had already gone through the entire app. I had seen everything, every picture, every comment, every private message she had exchanged with men who treated her like an object. I had never felt more betrayed in my life. It wasn't just about the pictures. It was about the lies, the deception, the life she had been living behind my back. When she walked in, she greeted me like nothing had happened. She was her usual self, calm, composed, the perfect Christian wife who had just come back from a church meeting. She smiled at me, but all I could see was the Sarah from those pictures. I couldn't keep it in any longer. I had to confront her. "Sarah, we need to talk," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She paused, looking at me with concern. "What's wrong?" she asked. setting down her bag. She had no idea what was coming. I held up her phone. Her face fell the moment she saw the app open on the screen. The color drained from her cheeks, and she froze in place. "I saw everything," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "All of it." She didn't say anything at first. She just stood there, her eyes wide, as if she had been caught in a trap. Then, after what felt like an eternity, she whispered, "I can explain." "Explain? How do you even begin to explain something like this? How do you explain living a double life while pretending to be someone else entirely?" I waited for her to continue, but she didn't. She just stared at the floor, avoiding my gaze. "It's not what you think," she finally said, her voice trembling. "It's just something I do for fun. It doesn't mean anything." Fun. That's what she called it. Fun. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Fun," I repeated, my voice rising. "You think this is fun? Posting pictures of yourself for strangers on the internet? Letting random men comment on your body? Is that what you call fun?" Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to let her cry her way out of this. Not after what she had done. "How long has this been going on?" I demanded. "How long have you been lying to me?" She wiped at her tears, her hands shaking. "It's not like that," she pleaded. "I never meant to hurt you. I swear, it's just something I do, for the attention. It doesn't mean anything." Her words only fueled my anger. "The attention?" I spat. "You need attention from strangers? What about me? What about our marriage? Was that not enough for you?" She flinched at my words, but she didn't answer. Instead, she broke down in sobs, her hands covering her face. But her tears didn't move me. I felt nothing but rage and betrayal. How could she have done this? How could she have thrown away everything we had built together, just for some cheap thrills on the internet? I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. But all I could do was stand there, my heart pounding in my chest, as I watched her cry. After what felt like hours of silence, Sarah finally spoke. Her voice was small, almost a whisper. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she said. "It started out as a joke, a way to, I don't know, feel better about myself. I never thought it would get this out of control." I stared at her, barely able to contain the storm of emotions swirling inside me. "A joke?" I said, incredulous. "You think this is funny?" She shook her head, tears still streaming down her face. "No, of course not. I don't know why I did it. I felt lost. I needed something, and this was a way to fill the void. But I never meant to hurt you." Her words sounded hollow, like a rehearsed apology meant to cover up the real reason behind her actions. And maybe that's what it was. Maybe she didn't even know why she did it, but that didn't matter to me. What mattered was the fact that the woman I thought I knew, the woman who was supposed to share my values, had been lying to me for God knows how long. "You say you never meant to hurt me," I said, my voice cold. "But you did. You've been living a lie, Sarah. You've been lying to me, to everyone. How do you even go to church every Sunday, knowing what you're doing behind my back?" She didn't answer. She just stood there, looking at me with those tear-filled eyes, as if she was the victim in all of this. But I wasn't going to let her play that card. Not this time. "You've made a fool out of me," I said, my voice shaking with barely contained anger. "Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? How betrayed I feel?" "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I didn't know how to stop. I didn't mean for it to go this far." "You didn't mean for it to go this far?" I repeated, my voice rising again. "Sarah, you've been doing this for months, maybe even longer. How could you not know how to stop? You could have stopped any time. But you didn't." She broke down again, her sobs filling the room. But I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. Not this time. Every tear she shed felt like a mockery of my pain, like she was trying to shift the blame onto her own insecurities, rather than facing the consequences of her actions. "I don't know what to do," she whispered through her sobs. "I'm so sorry. I don't know how to fix this." I stood there for a long time watching her cry, feeling my own heart break all over again. Part of me wanted to forgive her, Part of me wanted to hold her and tell her that we'd find a way to get through this. But another part of me, the part that had just seen the real her for the first time, knew that things would never be the same again. I didn't say anything else that night, couldn't. I just walked out of the room, leaving her there with her tears and her guilt. The next few days passed in a haze. Sarah stayed at her sister's house, and I stayed home, alone. The silence in the house was deafening. Every corner of our home felt like it was taunting me, reminding me of the life I thought I had, the life that now felt like a lie. I couldn't stop thinking about those pictures, the messages, the comments from strange men praising my wife's body. It played on a loop in my mind, a sickening reel that I couldn't shut off. I tried to focus on work, but it was impossible. Every time I sat down to do something, I'd find myself drifting back to that night, to the moment I unlocked her phone and saw everything unravel. How had I been so blind? How had I not noticed the signs? Looking back, I realized that there had been moments, small, subtle things, that should have tipped me off. Like how she started spending more time alone, even at home. She'd claim she needed some me time after her busy days at the church, or that she needed a break from all the community work she was involved in. She'd retreat into the guest room for hours at a time, and I never thought to question it. I figured she was praying, reading, or just decompressing. I never imagined she was doing that. Then there were the times she'd be on her phone late at night, her face lit by the glow of the screen while she lay in bed beside me. I would glance over, curious, and she'd always quickly lock the screen, offering some excuse about checking emails or messages from church friends. I never thought twice about it. Why would I? We had always trusted each other. We never hid anything, at least that's what I believed. I couldn't stop replaying our last conversation in my head. Her excuses, her apologies, her tears. None of it made sense to me. How could she claim it didn't mean anything? How could she do something like this and still act like the perfect Christian woman in every other aspect of her life? It felt like she was living in two worlds. One where she was the loving, faithful wife, and another where she sought validation from strangers online. The thought kept gnawing at me. Was our entire marriage a lie? Had she always been living this double life, hiding this part of herself from me? I started questioning everything. Our wedding, our memories, the moments when I thought we were building something real. How much of it was genuine? How much of it was a performance? I couldn't help but think about the version of Sarah I had fallen in love with. She was so strong in her faith back then, so vocal about living a life of virtue. We bonded over our shared beliefs, talking about the future we would build together, a future based on trust, honesty, and mutual respect. We attended church services together, prayed together, and planned our life around our Christian values. I used to admire her dedication, her ability to stand firm in her convictions even when others around her faltered. But now I wondered if any of that had been real. How could someone so focused on living a godly life do something like this? How could she reconcile the two versions of herself, the devout Christian and the woman who posted explicit photos of herself for strangers online? The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. She had made a mockery of our marriage. She had made a mockery of me. I had always prided myself on being a good husband, faithful, supportive, and honest. I thought we had a strong relationship, built on a foundation of trust. But it turns out that foundation had been crumbling for a long time, and I had been too blind to see it. I started avoiding people, including my own family. My mom called several times to check on me, but I let the calls go to voicemail. What was I supposed to tell her? That the perfect Christian daughter-in-law she adored had been living a secret life as an internet model? I couldn't bring myself to say the words. I wasn't ready for the questions, for the pity in their voices, for the looks of shock and disappointment. Even my friends seemed to sense something was wrong. A few of them reached out, asking if I wanted to grab a drink or catch a game, but I turned them down every time. I couldn't face them. Not yet. Not until I figured out what I was going to do. One evening, as I sat alone in the living room, the silence pressing in around me, I found myself opening her phone again. I had kept it after she left, partly because I didn't want her to delete anything before I had a chance to confront her again. But also, I wasn't ready to let it go. I wasn't ready to let her off the hook that easily. I scrolled through the app again, looking at the pictures, the comments, the messages. This time, I read the conversations she had with these men, random strangers who knew her body better than I did. The messages were flirtatious, suggestive. Some of them were explicit, while others seemed to be full of admiration for her looks, praising her beauty as if she were some kind of goddess. I felt sick. What was worse was how she responded. She soaked up the attention, feeding off of their compliments, playing along with their crude remarks. She laughed, teased, and engaged with them in ways she never did with me. It was as if she had created an entirely new identity for herself, someone who lived for validation, someone who craved the approval of men who didn't know the first thing about her real life. I slammed the phone down on the table, my hands shaking with rage. How could she do this to me? How could she betray me like this? I stood up, pacing the living room as my thoughts spiraled. I wanted to confront her again. I wanted to demand answers. But I knew it wouldn't change anything. I had already heard her excuses, her apologies. What more could she say? What more could I expect from someone who had been lying to my face for months, maybe even longer? The anger boiled inside me, threatening to explode. I grabbed the nearest object, a framed photo of the two of us on our wedding day, and hurled it across the room. The glass shattered against the wall, pieces falling to the floor like broken shards of my life. I stood there, panting, staring at the wreckage. Our wedding day. That was supposed to be the beginning of our life together. The day we vowed to love, honor, and cherish each other for the rest of our lives. I remember how happy we were, how sure we were that we were meant to be together. We exchanged vows, promising to stay faithful, to support each other through thick and thin. And now it felt like none of those promises mattered anymore. I collapsed onto the couch, burying my face in my hands. What was I supposed to do? How could I move forward from this? Could I ever forgive her? Could I ever trust her again? Days turned into weeks, and the silence between Sarah and me stretched on. She called a few times, left messages asking if we could talk, but I ignored them. I wasn't ready. I wasn't sure I'd ever be ready. Every time I thought about hearing her voice, it made my stomach churn. I didn't want to hear more excuses, more apologies. I didn't want to hear her try to explain away what she had done. But the longer I avoided her, the more I started to realize that I couldn't keep running from this. Eventually, I would have to face her. Eventually, I would have to make a decision about our marriage, whether to try and salvage what was left or to walk away for good. I wasn't sure which option scared me more. One night, after yet another sleepless evening spent tossing and turning, I decided I needed answers. Real answers. Not just the vague apologies she had offered before. I needed to know why she had done this, why she had felt the need to seek validation from strangers instead of coming to me. I needed to know if there was any hope left for us, or if our marriage was beyond repair. So I called her. She answered on the first ring, as if she had been waiting for my call. "Kurt," she said, her voice tentative, almost afraid. "Yeah, it's me," I replied, my voice sounding rough even to my own ears. There was a long pause on the line, the weight of everything unspoken hanging between us. "Can we talk?" I finally asked. "I've been waiting for you to say that," she whispered. We agreed to meet the next day at a coffee shop downtown, a neutral space where we could talk without the distractions of home, without the memories of our life together looming over us. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, maybe some kind of closure, maybe the answers I had been craving. But part of me knew that no matter what she said, it wouldn't change the fact that our marriage had been shattered beyond repair. When I arrived at the coffee shop the next day, Sarah was already there, sitting at a table by the window. She looked different, tired, worn down. Her usual confidence was gone, replaced by a nervous energy that I had never seen in her before. "Kurt," she said softly when she saw me, standing up as if she wanted to hug me, but I stayed where I was, keeping my distance. I wasn't ready for any kind of physical contact. We sat down, the tension between us palpable. For a moment, neither of us said anything. I stared at the table, my mind racing, trying to figure out where to start. Finally, I broke the silence. "Why, Sarah?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you do it?" She didn't look at me, Instead, she stared down at her hands, twisting her wedding ring around her finger. "I don't know," she said after a long pause. "I don't know why I did it. I felt lost. I felt like I wasn't enough, like I needed something more." I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. "You weren't enough?" I repeated, disbelief creeping into my voice. "We had a good life, Sarah. We had everything. How could you feel like you weren't enough?" She finally looked up at me, her eyes filled with tears. "It's not that I wasn't enough for you," she said, her voice trembling. "I wasn't enough for myself. I don't know how to explain it, but I felt invisible, like I was fading away. The church, our life, everything, it just felt so routine. And I started to wonder if this was it, if this was all I was ever going to be." I didn't know what to say. I understood the feeling of being stuck in a routine, of life becoming monotonous, but that didn't justify what she had done. It didn't justify betraying me, betraying our marriage. "So you turned to strangers for validation?" I asked, my voice rising slightly. "You decided that the way to fix that feeling was to start posting pictures of yourself online? To let random men treat you like an object?" She flinched at my words, but she didn't argue. "I know it was wrong," she whispered. "I know I hurt you, and I'm so sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't know what I was thinking. I got caught up in it, in the attention, in the way it made me feel. It was like I was living a different life, one where I wasn't just the church volunteer, the dutiful wife. It felt freeing, I guess." Her words stung, cutting deep into the wounds I was already carrying. It felt freeing? To betray me? To betray everything we stood for? "You had a choice, Sarah," I said, my voice shaking with barely controlled anger. "You could have come to me. You could have talked to me if you were feeling lost, if you were struggling. But instead, you chose to do this." Tears streamed down her face, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. I was too angry, too hurt. "I know," she whispered. "I know I should have come to you, but I didn't want to burden you with my feelings. I didn't want to seem weak. I thought I could handle it on my own, but I couldn't." For a long time, neither of us said anything. We just sat there, the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on us. I wanted to believe her, to believe that this was just some kind of mistake, some lapse in judgment. But deep down, I knew that this wasn't something we could just fix with apologies and tears.